You are listening to the People Centric Podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do.
Hey, people-centric leaders, this is Stephanie Anderson, and we are excited to welcome you back to another episode of the People Centric Podcast. And today, we've got a little bit of a spicy topic for you, which I love. If you listen to the podcast, you'll be like, shocking, Stephanie has an opinion about something. But I'm excited to bring this topic up because it's something that we hear somewhat often from people in our line of work, a complaint that we hear, and it's one that our team grapples with because sometimes we're like, yeah, you're probably right. And sometimes we're like, ooh, maybe you're wrong. And the thing that we often hear is the phrase like, my boss is toxic. My boss is toxic. And this is where I think it's going to be an interesting conversation with our team today, because like I said, I think sometimes we'll hear stories and we'll be like, wow, yeah, if those things are true, maybe we agree. But then sometimes we hear the stories and we're like, maybe it's not your boss. Maybe it's you. Or what if both are true? So I want to introduce our team who's here on the podcast with me today, and then maybe start us with a story from a friend I've heard recently. Maybe we can diagnose this. So with me today, I've got Diana Royalty and Philip Herzog.
Hello.
Say hello.
Salutations. Hello.
Hello. Salutations.
Can you hear me?
We
When
can
you
hear
said
you.
that, it reminded me of the pig from Charlotte's Web.
I thought
Where
the
it was like,
exact same thing.
salutations. I was like, oh,
The exact same thing.
it's
Yep.
Wilbur. So cute.
Wow, I should be very careful if I start getting associated with a pig. That's just not. That's not the
Oh, he's
vibe.
a sweet pig.
Yeah, a
He's
great
piglet.
pig.
He's a great pig.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, well, anyhow. So, but I agree. I thought that too. So, Diana, Philip, do toxic bosses exist? This is our topic for today. And so I am honestly so curious here because I brought this topic to our team because again, I'm going to share a story here shortly that I heard from a friend recently. Because I think we have a complex answer to this. And I brought it up to genuinely also hear our team talk about this because I know we may not all completely agree as well. This makes it a little spicy, but was recently talking to a friend of mine and, the last year of work for her has been challenging, right? And I will say like, as her friend listening, I feel very protective of her. And then also as the consultant listening, I have a lot of questions, right? About the stories that she tells me and the things that happen to her at work, and just how different situations with other employees are handled. But she brought this up recently because it feels like her boss has turned on her. Okay. So she's worked there a couple years. She's gotten promotions since she worked there. And now all of a sudden it feels like her boss is saying, you're not actually good at your job. We don't think this is a great fit anymore. They are doing some things that I would probably put in like the unethical area in the business and especially how they're treating her and some other employees. But I said it was interesting because again, like as her friend, I'm like, ooh, this is bad, run. But then again, as the consultant, I'm like, I have so many questions about this scenario. And anytime we hear all of the sudden this started happening, that to me is a flag because I don't think anybody all of the suddens, right, There probably have been things that have been going on all along, and I want to hear more of the story to know, like, okay, is your boss really toxic and unethical? Are you a part of the problem? Right? Maybe it's you a little bit. What's your role in this? Or could both be true? So I want to just open the floor of like, first question is like, when people tell you, Diana and Philip, my boss is toxic, like what goes through your mind?
I think because we're consultants, the word toxic means something very different to me. And I think the word toxic has like a lot of baggage. It could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But to me, when you say someone is toxic, I'm like, oh, someone is misaligned with the mission, vision, values of the organization, right? Like, which one is misaligned with that? And so then I also think it's very hard for an owner to be toxic because they're creating that culture, right? So if someone is creating a really bad culture or someone is unethical, I think those are separate things from being toxic. So like there's a lot of baggage in this language for me. But I think absolutely there are owners who are unethical and there are owners who are narcissistic and there are owners who are really poor leaders, but maybe not toxic. And if those people are doing unethical, terrible things, and you are like, I don't want to do unethical, terrible things, then technically in our language, you're the toxic one because you are misaligned with the organization.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of language there that's just, you got to unpack a little bit first.
Okay, over to you, Philip.
Yeah, and I would say my hot take is adjacent, and yet I would say yes. I think that leaders and owners can be toxic, but I love Diana's point. You know, the phrase like, "Oh, that's a toxic relationship." People say that all the time about people that they're with or people that their friend is with that they don't like. And it is a different meaning when we talk about that alignment piece. I love how Diana put it. I always like to imagine if, and maybe that's because I would say that there are, for me also, that ethical or moral mission, I think impacts the goodness to society and community. So if there's a company that's mission is to destroy all bumblebees on the planet so that their special patented bumblebee replacement tools could be sold at a high profit, that would be a terrible company. That would be terrible. The leader could have every great leadership skill in the book, but they'd be doing bad things. This leader could also be really bad at destroying all the bumblebees. Either way, if you're aligned with that organization, you would also be like, we are going to profit off of the death of all the bees. So I think that a mission's goodness or badness is less often what people talk about, but I think sometimes they do point out if someone says, I really don't like my boss. Well, it could be a company that really clearly says our priority is profit, and not just some of it, a ton of it. And so if someone says, I have a toxic boss, it could be like, no, you're actually literally misaligned because the greatest mission of the organization is not matched with you. Like you actually care about something entirely different, which is profit and something else. So I think that it is impactful when people say my boss is toxic. That's a really big story. And so to your point, I think, well, what are all the dynamics there? What does that mean? But the reason I think an owner could be toxic, even if their company is great, I think we have met people in the past who, if you think of it as engagement, they're engaged, they're all in, or they're disengaged, like, or toxic, like, I'm really misaligned. Like, have you ever met a business owner who held on to the reins of the company because they didn't know what else to do, and they were beyond disengaged, and that led to a decrease in engagement of others? I look at that as toxic. So it's less common, but it could happen.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think one thing I'll add here is, you know, we're using some language of like engaged, disengaged, toxic. And just to throw out, in case you haven't heard us talk about this before, a lot of that language kind of originally comes from Gallup does like a national and a worldwide like workforce engagement metric. And the language that they originally used said an employee is either engaged, disengaged, or toxic toxic in the workplace. So engaged is like, I'm completely aligned with where we're going. I'm all in. I love our team, right? Which means I'm using my strengths and skills as best I can at work. Disengaged would be like, I'm here. I'm completing my work. But it is a little bit more of that, like, I'm just here and I'm just doing it. What sometimes call like a clock in, clock out mentality, which means you could be still producing good work, but you're probably not giving your best at work. You're probably not being able to utilize all of your strengths. Maybe you disagree with some of the ways the company is run. And then the third bucket, which originally Gallup called toxic, they've adjusted their language a little bit in the last couple of years, I think, to both of yours point, because that word has become really culturally buzzy now. So they've changed their language to call it actively misaligned or actively disengaged. I think it's actively disengaged now that I say that out loud. Actively disengaged. And that's the person who would say, like, I am super frustrated working here. I disagree with a lot of the decisions that the leadership is making. It could even veer into that like culturally toxic territory where then I have a horrible attitude and I treat other people poorly. I am really like the no fun person to work with. I'm the desk you avoid when you walk in. Or sometimes we'll say it's kind of like the secretly, misaligned person that's like, well, I love this company more than anyone else here. And that's why I can't believe you idiots make all these decisions and run this place. So I just wanted to add that context because I think when I heard both of you answer, I agreed with so much of what you said, because I'm like, yeah, based on those definitions, it's kind of impossible for a company or a owner especially to be toxic, because they're the ones that are like, that is the mission. And that's who created that and who's done those things. And so in that instance, we'd say, well, yeah. And I liked your example, Philip. Even if the mission of the company is to kill all the bumblebees, you could really, really disagree with that. But if the leader is aligned with the mission and is executing it, then technically you would be the actively disengaged or toxic person, even though you're probably right. And I will say, I think if we go back to that like cultural understanding of the word toxic, I think there are toxic leaders. I think there are, to what you were both saying, I think there are leaders who treat people poorly and do unethical things and it's not just the like, oh, they're stealing or some of those like those big things, but just like in how they treat the team. And it's those little, like those microaggressions that make you feel like you're death by 1,000 paper cuts of the sly things that are said, or the underhanded things are working around you in a way that feels really intentional. Or maybe it is like actually saying unkind things to you or other people on the team, or making decisions for the business that hurt the people inside the company. So I think it can be a both and, but like, I'm curious. So I have some opinion on this because I think I've been in a situation before where I would have said that phrase. And in fact, I did. I said that phrase, like my leader's toxic. And I did some evaluation, and now, hindsight is 2020. But I'm curious what you would both say is like, okay, if I'm in that position and I feel like my boss is toxic, how do I evaluate? Am I the one who's misaligned or not? Or is something bad happening here that really like violates some values or boundaries for me? Like, how do I know?
That's a great question. And, I like we were started a little philosophical. Can an owner leader be toxic? But I think I love this question because it's really saying, well, when we hear that, what does that mean? How would we coach someone through it? And I am getting distracted by Diana's near sneeze. So sorry. I'll have to cut this out. We're making her emotional. It's clearly important talk.
It like I half sneezed. It was coming and then it didn't. It's very annoying.
So good.
I'm so sorry.
I think, I will
Funny.
start over. So then I'll just have better words this time. That was pretty great, though. I could not move past that. Okay.
So sorry.
Great question, Stephanie. We started a little philosophical talking about can leaders be toxic? But when we hear that statement from someone, I think it means something because it's really talking about the alignment. Clearly, they are misaligned with their leader. So my question then is, what's their role in building better alignment? What's the leader's role in building better alignment? And it could be that the leader has expectations that they're not communicating well. And so the team member feels like they're consistently hitting the wrong work or they're doing things in a different way. An example that came today, I was talking to someone that went through a program in Springfield, Leadership Springfield. We're big fans of theirs. And someone said, I did this strengths finding, and in the process, all my strengths, they said, did not line up with the role I have in my industry. And I thought, oh my gosh, am I in the wrong? Am I in the wrong? And so he said through the entire program, he was thinking, I probably need to change careers because the strengths tell me that I should be doing something else, even though I do like my work and I think I'm good at it. But he came at the end and he finally said, it wasn't until I realized my strengths can have application in my industry. It doesn't mean you have to be a nerd if you're going to do this field, right? Or it doesn't even mean that the most successful leader can always be the most charismatic and inspiring from a stage. So the reason I think that comes up too is for him as a leader, he probably had a different engagement level when he was wondering, am I even in the right career field? But his bigger question was, how do I use my strengths and apply it where I am? A team member could have looked at that and said, I don't think he likes me. I think that he's toxic. I think he hates me. Well, I'm going to be hateful back. So I think when we tend to hear that, it's probably not as bad as it sounds. There's more going on.
Yeah, and I'll add that when you asked that question, Stephanie, I can't totally remember how you phrased it, but the first thing that popped in my head was like, does it matter? Does it make a difference, right? Because I think if you have already written a story about your leader and you don't feel good about being in the work that you're at, or you feel like you're misaligned, it's probably time to move on, right? Like, so it might not matter. I do know, like, you have to have a job, you have to make money, all of those things, but those might be signals that like you either need to hard adjust to find the alignment and rewrite the story, or it is time for you to move on to something else that fits you better, right? Like, I don't remember exactly how you phrased it, but my initial thought was like, maybe it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Yeah. And I think it does at a certain point, you have to also ask yourself, like, how much am I willing to fight for this mission? And how much does the mission matter? And also the mission might really, really, really matter to you. And you may just find yourself like misaligned with a leader and just be like, how you want to do this is so different from how I want to do this or how I want to work, that it makes us misaligned. It makes then me as the employee, the toxic, quote unquote, one, because I'm probably going to actively resist the processes that you create or the projects that we're going to do because it's not the approach that I want, even if the mission really matters. And also, like, there is an emotional toll to feeling this way. And we each have our own boundaries and lines for behavior and what we feel is right or wrong and how people should or should not be treated, or how a business should run or function, and I think of the friend of mine that inspired this story. Some of the things she's telling me her leader is doing, they are completely legal, right? But they suck, right? They're things that hurt people. And I think they are unethical, right? Like some of the things they're doing regarding like employee pay and benefits and stuff that they're doing and how they're giving performance reviews and how they're judging people based on their work. Like it violates my ethical boundary lines, right? Like I wouldn't be able to handle that. But at the end of the day, like it's not like her leader's not doing anything illegal. Right. And so I think there is a distinction there as well. But maybe I'll just share, like, if I think back to a time in my career where I kind of had this moment of recognition, oh, maybe I am a part of the problem. Maybe I am actively disengaged or toxic. I think it was a little bit both and, right? Like, objectively now, hindsight, I can step back and say, I was misaligned with the leader. They wanted to do things and take the organization in a direction that I did not agree with, right? I wanted to see other things happen. And this was a mission that really, really meant something to me and was not killing the bumblebees. It was actually trying to do really good things in the world. But it became very clear to me at a certain point. And I can remember even the meeting I was sitting in where I had this aha that they were talking about the new things we were going to do and approach. And I was like, I don't want to do any of that. Like, in fact, I want to do the opposite of all of that. But where I can say I was toxic is, like, before I had that aha, I mean, I was a little bit the employee that was having the meeting after the meeting and calling other colleagues and saying, like, can you believe that? And how do they think that's a good idea? And blah, 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 blah. And I probably was sowing some discontent among the team. Now, do I think I was right? Yeah, I think I was right about several things. And now, again, hindsight's 2020. We can see how a couple of things panned out. I think I was right about a couple of things. But also, I was misaligned because that is the way they wanted to take the organization. And those are the changes that they wanted to make. So I think in that sense, I was toxic. But I will also say, I think we had some toxic leaders who I also look back and I'm like, I don't like how you treated me. I don't like how you treated other people when they disagreed. When those conversations happened, they were not open and thoughtful and collaborative. It wasn't always kind. There wasn't always a lot of empathy shown in those moments. And so I think that's the other thing I'll put on the table is, like, both things can be true. I think we can have, like, a little bit of the humility maybe to admit, like, this is not the right fit for me, and I'm not the right fit for this. And there may be some things that are happening that you just, on, like, an ethical or values, moral level, are just saying, like, I'm not going to do that. And I don't have to put up with that. I'm going to go find another job. So, I mean, yeah, we've been talking if it's either or, but I also think there's, like, a both and that could be true.
Yeah. I think I've told the story about how I worked for an organization and, I really liked what I was doing, but the owners wanted to take it one way. And I was like, well, to get there, you have to do this. And they were like, we're not going to do that. And I was like, but we should, and we should do that. And they were like, we're not going to do that. Stop telling us we should do that. We're not going to do that. And I got misaligned because I was still like, I'm going to drive us towards this mission, but I want to do it in a way where the owners did not want to do it that way. And so I did become toxic, and I was also right. Like, I to this day, I still contend I was right. Like, I was right, but I was also toxic. But on the other side of that, I think they did things that made employees feel bad, and they did things that were not super ethical. And so, yeah, it is sort of the all yes and I, now that I work for People Centric, it bothers me when leaders do things that hurt people or intentionally, focus on the wrong thing. Those things bother me because we're people centric, and I don't think those should be competing interests. And I think there's a way to do those things really well, and good leaders do them well, and the bad leaders give everyone else a bad name, and hurt people and make people stay in jobs that are miserable and all of those things. But I think the key is, like, it's all of the picture, right? If People Centric came to you guys and said, hey, we're cutting all of our pay, here's why, I think everyone will be upset, right? Nobody wants their pay cut. But we could do that in a way that was ethical and kind and caring and supported you guys while supporting the company, right? It would be different. And I think there are good ways to handle business decisions and there are bad ways to handle business decisions. And I think that's what this kind of comes down to is like, are people handling it well? Are they being good leaders and good stewards of the people that they have hired? And when leaders stop doing those things or don't think about those things, that's when it becomes a very hard workplace to live in.
I think I heard the phrase recently. Someone said, that dog will hunt. That dog you described will hunt. That was so good. I'm moved. I think that's so exciting too, what you shared, Diana, that idea of the people stewardship, essentially, just kind of that concept. You could make a really great decision. You could make a really hard survival decision. Cut the pay of your team so you can survive a quarter that's low. You can do that in a way that's really great. You can do that in a way that's really bad. Both will hurt, but there's one that hurts but then builds trust. And I was thinking, a lot of our teams we work with, we talk about as a team, we have some client choice. There are clients that we really choose to work with. And sometimes there are folks that come into, our circles and say, I want to work with you. I need you to fix my team. All these dummies can't figure anything else out. And it's all their fault. And we might still say, okay, let's talk about this. Let's work on it. Let's see what we can do. But a leader that does not succeed, that's not good with people stewardship, is the leader that's like, look at how far I've come and look at what I've done. And I think our team will step back and say, hey, good on you. But step back and think about where you're trying to go and how much farther and better you could do it if you have the right people and the right systems. And so that's why that how is so important as opposed to just the why.
Yeah, I agree. And I like how both of you framed both of those things. Because, yeah, like sometimes leaders do have to make unpopular decisions, right? And we've been using this example of like cutting pay. I mean, yeah, like businesses can do that. And sometimes leaders have to make really hard decisions to be like, well, I can either like reduce pay and benefits for a period of time, but we all survive, or like I have to choose to lay off people, or maybe the business doesn't make it. And what I'd say for that from the employee perspective is like, you don't have to like that or agree with it. But maybe to what Diana said earlier, like if you find yourself there, then you probably are working at the wrong place. And that doesn't mean that you're bad or your employer is bad. But it might be your signal. Like if you're finding yourself really disagreeing with those decisions, maybe you're not at the right place, right? Maybe you don't want to work at a business that would make that decision, and that's okay. And I think that's the thing that sometimes I'll hear from employees when they're telling me, oh, my boss is toxic. It's almost like they've decided like the boss has to be the one that would go. And this is the hard, crappy truth I'm just going to say is it's not very often that then that leader is the one that goes. And so sometimes you have to just kind of have a reckoning of self and say like, maybe I do disagree with everything here. And, maybe I don't want to work that way. Maybe I don't want to work at a company that would make that kind of decision or would do those kinds of things. And again, we also all have to know where our own lines are, right? Like we have to know where our own lines are. We have to know what our own personal values are, where our personal like ethics, morals stand. What are you willing to tolerate and what are you not? And again, I'm saying all this, and this is not in defense of companies who do make choices that hurt people, but it's also saying like there are two distinct players, I think, in this, and each can make their own decision and have their own roles in that. And you do not have to agree with each other. But I think if you find yourself disagreeing, then like something's got to change or give. Don't just stay and be miserable because your hope is to someday take down your boss. Like don't do that to yourself. And again, like Diana said, like we all have to work. We all have to make money. Like I know very few people who just are like, I can just afford not to work and do anything. But maybe it is time to look for something different if you find yourself in that position, and you don't have to wait for the boss for somebody to finally see it or hold them accountable or do X, Y, and Z. Like you can just exit, and that's a totally okay thing to do. So yeah, I think it is a hard thing to talk about. Like even as I'm speaking, I'm like, oh, this is so hard because like I'm also like high justice person. So I'm like, the minute I see people being mistreated, and I will tell you, like for my friend who's telling me these stories, I am like coming in hot, big sister friend energy, like protecting my friend, all of these things. But then, yeah, also in my head is the consultant saying like, God, this sucks. And I do not like any of the decisions your boss is making, but technically they can do that. They can do these things. I think it's icky. I hate seeing people treated that way. I think that is wrong. And also, unfortunately, those are decisions they can make and they can do, and they can change the company in that way anytime that they want.
Yeah. I think when I was in that situation, I was trying to like not just save myself, but also right injustices for the rest of the team. You know, I was like, oh, I'm going to save everybody and I'm going to take this down from the inside and I'm going to say the exact right thing to get them to hear me. And one of the things my mentor said was two things, like injustice exists and you just have to be okay with that. And you can do everything right and still not win. Right. So it was just like those two things combined together. I was like, okay, she's telling me that I can do all of these things and I could still say the exact right thing and I could still do all the good work and I can try to save the entire team. But at the end of the day, I don't control any of that and I can't change anyone else. Right. So I can only change me and I can only change how I interact and how I react. And to do that, I needed to move on. And I think that was a really hard decision for me. And when I left, I felt bad for all of the people I was leaving behind and all that, right? But I was like, also, they're adults and they have to choose this for them. And there are still people at that place that I'm like, I cannot believe you're still there, right? But they chose that for themselves. And so I think you have to remember that there are moments where you can stand up a little bit for the little guy or for the others or for the injustice, but know that it doesn't always change and that injustice exists.
Yeah.
It
yeah,
sucks.
it does. And I think like, I think you can express disappointment and frustration. I think it's okay to say, this is why I am leaving. Right. But I also think there is a professional approach to doing that, which if you need advice on that, let us know. But yeah, I think it's a tough and complex topic, and I appreciate both of your thoughts to this because again, it's something that's not uncommon for us to hear. And it makes us ask a lot of questions and want to lean in and figure out like, okay, where is misalignment happening? Or where are boundaries being crossed that are uncomfortable or maybe unethical? And where are those lines and what's actually happening when we hear someone say, my boss is toxic? Well, anyone else have anything to add to this? Final thoughts?
My final thought is just that this is why leadership matters so much, right? And I think why psychological safety matters even more. I think a great leader creates a team where there is that, and that space where I can come and raise my hand and ask ideas or challenge or even push back. If I can fight decently, healthily, and then we can come back and move forward together, that's the mark of a great leader. And it matters because I think there's a lot of teams where if someone tells us, I have a terrible toxic leader, After they leave, there's just very different open conversations, right? Many times that leader is typically surprised that team member's frustrations were caused so much by them. They didn't know. So I sometimes think about how much leadership feels like being a bull in the china shop. You're bumping into a lot of people you don't always know. So be a present leader, build psychological safety, and always remember your role as a leader carries far more influence than you probably think.
Yeah. Well said. Well, we hope this has been helpful to you today, or maybe at least an interesting thought process to go through. So yeah, we hope this has been good. If you have other ideas or topics you'd love for us to tackle, send them our way. I know we say that often, but a lot of the ideas that we talk about in the podcast come from other people. So we'd love to hear what are the things you'd love our team to kind of break down or dissect or talk about. And yeah, listen to the outro for how to get a hold of us. But we hope the rest of your day is great, and we'll see you back here soon.
Thank you for listening to the People Centric Podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic. Until then, be well and lead well.